You're listening to What Goes On Here, and I'm Sam Walker. Whoever we are and whatever we do, we all have moments when we feel like we don't quite fit with the world around us. What Goes On Here is where you can listen to real stories of people who at times couldn't see a way forward, people who found themselves stuck, maybe in a life they never imagined would be theirs, people who had to face their fears, face themselves, but they changed, and changed lives of people around them too. On Season 3, this is Episode 6, Lemn. Lemn Sissay is a poet. He's published numerous collections along with several plays, was commissioned to write for the London Olympics, and amongst many other achievements, he's also Chancellor of Manchester University.
I was right for that job. I am part of the Manchester animal, and I got to be able to say that. I mean, that was so deep for me.
Born in the late 60s to a single Ethiopian mother who was in Britain studying, Lemn was placed into foster care in a small town in the north of England.
I was Norman Mark Greenwood. I was their son forever. They loved me. My mother was from Africa, and she was a terrible woman, this is what I was told, because she left me and they saved me.
But when Lemn was just 12, his foster family, the only family he'd ever known, virtually without warning returned him to social services, and he was placed into a series of children's homes.
I lost everybody. Brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, granddad, grandma, great-grandma, streets, first girlfriends, school, all of my friends. The worst nightmare that a child may wake up thinking there is nobody is ever going to be in touch with me that I've ever known.
If there's no one in your life you can call family, no one who knows your story, no one to share your memories, how do you find your place in the world and discover who you really are?
I just sort of folded myself into myself and just died. My head fell into my shoulders, fell down into my chest, and I sort of like closed the curtains of myself, and I was just like, I'm really scared of everybody and everything.
What did your foster parents tell you about who you were and where you were from when you were growing up?
My foster parents told me that I was Norman Mark Greenwood. They wanted to call me Mark, after Mark in the Bible. And Norman was the name that the social worker said, you must have this name, you must call him by this name. He's yours forever, but you've got to call him Norman. Because God told them to foster me, they wanted to call me Mark. So I was Norman Mark, and then their last name was Greenwood, which was a very Lancashire, Rochdale sort of name. So yeah, I was Norman Mark Greenwood. I was their son forever. They loved me. I was loved. My mother was from Africa, and she was a terrible woman, this is what I was told, because she left me and they saved me. And so what more would a child want who is not of the blood of a family than the family to say that they'd saved him, you know? So for me, they were everything, and I felt like I was everything to them, you know.
So that is an incredible position for a child to be in, to feel that love and to feel like they were chosen and rescued and nurtured and taken care of. But you must have felt different, not just with them, but with everyone else around you in this northern Lancashire mill town.
I did feel different, and I loved every minute of it. My difference, to me, formed a bridge to people because they looked at me as if I was some sort of like an alien, you know, like an alien visitor. I looked very different. I was black. I had, you know, Ethiopian features, and I smiled a lot, you know, as a child. So I just happened to be the kind of personality as a child that would see the attention that was kind of garnered on me as a wonderful thing, an opportunity to connect.
You're smiling as you're talking about this.
Yeah.
You're smiling as you're talking about your childhood.
Yeah, because, because I'm cherishing the fact that that's who I was, and knowing that I was a good kid is important to me because of what was about to happen.
And what did happen was on the cusp of becoming a young man at 12 years old, this family who said, we saved you, we chose you, we love you. What changed their mind? How would you describe it?
They took a very small baby who was very, babies are quite incredible because they just want love, What they fostered was a baby, and what happened is the baby started to become a boy, and the boy started to go into adolescence, and he started to take biscuits from the tin without saying please and thank you. He started to stay out late with his friends. My foster mother, I know now, was going through postnatal depression. I didn't know that at the time, and in fact I didn't know that until a few years ago. And they had not had an adolescent before. This is very important because they viewed what was happening to me that the devil was working inside of me and was forming inside of me, making me lie to them, making me stay out late with friends. And they were looking at me as if to say, well, literally to say, who is this person? We don't know who he is. We don't know what he's going to become. He's not hugging us the same way. He's lying. He's being deceitful. That was a word that was used a lot, deceitful. And, I had to pray and go to church, and I had people, sort of trying to exorcise this evil out of me. And what they didn't know, really simply, is that I was just going through adolescence. But they never told me that. They never admitted that. So they tried to convince me that I didn't want to be with them. And then they put me into children's homes. They said that it was my choice to leave them.
So how, just to take a step back, how on earth did that conversation go? Or was it a process that they started to convince you it was your idea to leave the only home you'd ever known?
Because I wasn't adopted, I was fostered. Although they said they were my mum and dad forever. I had to have a social worker come every month to see me, and so they realised they had the option of putting me into care. But they could not put me into care in that God is the person that told them to foster me. So they couldn't go against the word of God. So they sat me down and they said, my foster mother said to me, she said, "You don't love us, do you?" And I, of course, said, "Of course I love you. You're my mum and dad. There's no question about it." And she said, "Read the Bible, come back to us tomorrow. We'll have a same meeting, and we want you to really think about whether you do love us or not, because the way you've been acting is not conducive with love." By now, by the way, they'd had 3 children of their own. They'd just had a baby, of which my mother was suffering from postnatal depression. So I came back the next day and I said, and I thought about it. I thought I had the perfect theological answer for my Baptist foster parents. I was 12 years of age, and I said, "I mustn't love you." I said, "But I will ask God for forgiveness." And the theology was perfect, the timing unquestionable. The answer, that I gave them was honest as a sinner could get, and I was a sinner, and I knew that, and we were all sinners. That's the Baptist faith teaches us that. And I thought this was a perfect answer. I thought this is what they wanted me to see. Remember, I'd read the Bible many times. I'd read books on the Bible. I went to Bible studies on a Wednesday. I went to church on a Sunday and a Saturday. We prayed before breakfast, before each meal. And I said, I'll ask God for forgiveness. And my foster mother said, "Because you don't love us, you don't want to be with us." And the next day, my social worker was waiting for me in the car at the house, and I left, and I never saw them again. And they said they would never write to me, they would never contact me, because it was my choice to leave them.
Being driven away in that car at 12 years old, leaving the only place you'd ever known as home, leaving the only people you'd ever known as family, and walking into a place where you knew no one. How on earth were those first few days?
Well, we are talking about a major trauma here, and I say that, I shouldn't begin by saying that. What I should say is I lost everybody. Brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, granddad, grandma, great-grandma, streets, first girlfriends, school, all of my friends. I mean, the landscape, the church, the Sunday school. I lost everything, right? It was like, it's everything that every family does everything to prove that it will not happen for their child. The worst nightmare that a child may wake up thinking, there is nobody is ever going to be in touch with me that I've ever known. I loved the children's homes because I went in and I remember in my mind, and this is what trauma is, I could not imagine that I would never be in touch with my family again. Okay, so there was no intellectual understanding that this is the beginning of something else. It's the unimaginable. So the unimaginable means that you will cry occasionally, but you will get on with whatever you've got to get on with. And this was a home full of, you know, kind of kids coming from really, you know, damaged, dysfunctional families. And my job was to survive. So this is when you get to the edge of trauma, which is like fight or flight. It was like I had to survive, you know, so I had to use whatever resources I had. And the only resource that I had that I could see was my personality, you know. So I became everybody's extrovert. You know, I was the black boy of the village, you know, of the town, of another town, you know. I didn't know I was a black boy as much as I did when I went into the children's homes. I mean, but I did them because I had to wipe the spit off my back, and I had to move quick, and I had to pull on my resources of humour and wit, and kind of I had to outstep everybody. And this is the dance of a damaged human being in shock, to make everybody think that there is nothing wrong. I had no love, and I just wanted to extricate it from anywhere that it was sourced. I loved school, not because of the studies, but because I could smell family on people, and I was just that I was, nobody who met me as a kid would forget me, you know, and so I can, you know, I can go back to my village now, and people will still remember me from 30 years ago, for lots of reasons, but primarily because I couldn't allow myself to be unforgettable. I had to know that I would be remembered by somebody, because then I was part of some sort of idea of family.
But this is something you had to do, not once, not after that enormous rejection and huge trauma, but again and again and again. 5 times. You were in 5 different children's homes over the course of 6 years. Every time you had to walk in again and again, make that statement about who you were.
Yeah, I think it was 4 children's homes. I think it was over, 4 children's homes over 5.5 years, which means that I was in any children's home for no longer than 16 months, and the staff changed every 4 hours. Children's often came in for 6 months at a time. You know, there was no way of being able to get purchase. Basically, I was in an institution that would not let me hold on to any idea of love or being loved. So what you had in the care system very clearly was a boy who was built to love and be loved, but who was institutionally denied that possibility, who could see himself being denied it institutionally, and who at 16 years of age was in a children's home, who looked out of the window and thought, I can't go outside anymore. And I couldn't, and I didn't, and I just sort of folded myself into myself, and, just died. My head fell into my shoulders, fell down into my chest, and I sort of like closed the curtains of myself, and I was just like, I'm really scared of everybody and everything, and I don't think I can go out anymore. That was people used to spit at me off the buses that came past. They would report me to the police for if I stepped out of the street that I normally walked on. They would beat me. I mean, physically beat me. They would, just because of the colour of my skin, and I just grew tired of it all, not just that, but just what the institution was doing to me, and how the staff, even if the staff in the children's homes cared, they weren't allowed to care. When I went into care at 12 years of age, the first thing I needed was a hug. It's what my foster parents used to do. Touch became so important in our family, and so important to me. I was such a tactile child. And I went into care, and the first thing I wanted was a hug, and it was the last thing that I got. Nobody touches you in care physically. So I was at the beginning of not being touched at 12 years of age. And, so by 16, I kind of gave up the ghost. They did not know what to do with me. I'd left school. I'd fallen into a very deep depression and could not get out of it. And then they were suddenly looking at me going, well, he's not going outside, he's not looking for a job, he should be looking for a job now, because at 18 he'll be leaving the care system. I mean, I didn't realise that that's what they were thinking at the time. So I'm pretty sure that they thought that they would sharp shock me. And then they locked me away in an assessment remand centre. A virtual prison with murderers, muggers, criminals, but actually boys who were probably criminalised. And they put me into this basic prison. I was locked into my bedroom at night, which we shared with 7 other people. The only thing I had was Bob Marley. The only thing I had was the words of his songs, He seemed to be really speaking to my experience. We had to march down the corridors in size order. Whenever I had a visitor, I was strip searched in the sports hall. The staff got us to play medicine ball, which was this horrific game, violent game, and British bulldog, and the staff would want us to fight. That was horrible. It's under police investigation right now, this place.
Did you have any idea why you were there?
So, all my life as a child, I've held on to the idea that everything that is happening to me is telling me that I have done something wrong and that I am bad, or intrinsically I am bad. And I have had to hold on to the belief while in there that I'm not. And nothing makes sense, because if you're being punished like consistently over your basically entire childhood, then if you don't think that you deserve being punished, you are actually proving yourself to be mad.
Where's your mental escape in this? I mean, you mentioned Bob Marley, but what did you do? Was there something you could do for yourself that gave you some mental escape?
I wrote poetry. Like, I've always written poetry, and that's where my truth was. And I was like, you know what? All of this is fine, folks. What I'm doing here, it doesn't cost you any. I'm not taking anything from you. You don't have to be interested in what I'm writing here. This is where my evidence of my experience will begin. Now, I've collected a lot of evidence about the story I'm telling you now, like literal documentary evidence. However, for my sanity, I had to write down stuff to go, this isn't right, is it, what's happening here? because I had no family to call up the social services and say, hey, what about blah? And we remember X. I was written out of memory. I think I spent a long time trying to prove that I wasn't bad, which is actually a terrible way to live.
How did life change for you when you left the care system?
Oh, I was given my birth certificate, and it had the name of my mother on it, Lemn Sissay, and it also had my name, Lemn Sissay.
You'd never seen your name before?
Never seen my name. And remember, they had to give me my birth certificate as a legal obligation. This had nothing to do with them caring for me. And also they had to give me my birth certificate, and they would normally give it to a responsible adult, like a parent, and say, this is his birth certificate. But there was no family. So them passing me that piece of paper was an admission of guilt. But it wasn't to them. It was a legal obligation. But when I got it and I saw my name and it said Lemn Sissay on it, I said, I was right. They've been lying to me. They've been lying to me about my own name. If they're going to lie to me about my own name, what else have they lied to me about? And the social worker gave me a letter from my mother. He said, somebody did love you. And he gave me a letter from my mother pleading for me back to a social worker who she gave me to have me fostered for a short period of time while she was studying. But I didn't know that then, okay? All I knew is that this woman in this letter, 4 months after I was born, loved me and wanted me back. And clearly she didn't sign the adoption papers, so she did not want me adopted. And she says here, how can I get them back?
How did that change you?
So I left the children's homes, and what they did is they gave me the birth certificate and they gave me the letter and they shut the door. So like being 12, I had no access to any memories from that time. And I travelled then to Manchester, which was the big city on the horizon. By the way, this was the place that everybody told me that dangerous black people lived in. This is where the muggers are. This is where the Mossad is. This is where the dangerous black people that I'd heard about all my life live. There, I'm a black man. They're the people that I need to speak to. So, what's that thing about going towards what you fear most, And I went, and I went right into the heart of Mossad, man. I just went out to learn about what it was to be black, and in Manchester there were there was the Caribbean community, so it was all clubs and ackee and saltfish and gunga peas and banana cake, and I had my first black girlfriend, and her mum would cook every weekend, and I was a poet. I was becoming known as a poet because I would perform in these towns, and because I didn't know the rules of what needed to be said and what didn't need to be said, I would explode with this kind of energy of, this is the truth, this is what happened to me.
What did it feel like when you were stood on stages in front of an audience, and possibly for the first time in your life, people were listening to you?
Wow. Well, I did a reading once it was actually in Bradford at the university. I was about 21, and Grace Nichols, a great Caribbean poet, and James Berry and Valerie Bloom, these are all like grandees of Caribbean literature in the diaspora, but also in the Caribbean as well. Grace is famous in her own country. She said, Grace, I did this reading with them, and she said, I think we want to hear from him again. Do you? And the audience went, ah! I'll never forget that reading because it was like an arrival for me.
Nobody listened to you for the first 18 years of your life.
I spent the first 10 years of my career probably telling people that I didn't deserve any compliment that they were giving me. I could not enjoy the attention, so I wouldn't allow it. So I spend a lot of time going, oh, thanks very much. No, I was just doing what I do, I just spent a lot of time doing that. I used to get very drunk as well after my readings. I would do basically anything not to acknowledge that this is a good thing.
So as you became more and more successful and you wrote plays and you gave interviews and your poems were published and critically lauded and changed people who read them, I mean, what did that success feel like?
I don't know. Okay, let me try and unpack it. It wasn't success to me. I didn't have a family. And I always used to come back to that. And I every time I was in a newspaper, this is basically it. Every time I was in a newspaper, it was proof that I was alive. Like, because I grew this idea on leaving the care system that I had nobody. I mean, it's true. So people would say to me, "Oh, you're really successful." I say, "Well, how am I successful?" I go home and there's nobody there. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't say this, but it would be front and centre. There's nobody there. You know, if you're at home, you run away from your father or mother and you go to city and you have children, whatever, and you're looking back and you're like, "See, I did it. You didn't think I'd do it, but I did it." Or you look back and you go back to your mum and dad and you say, "Look, I did what you said, or I'm independent now, but I can see what you've done, and look, I got this," and you bring your child out, or I did not have those things. I did not have anybody who was going, "Well done," like who knew me when I was a child. So it was like everything I did was kind of thrown into this bottomless well that didn't have an echo. All family is a set of echoes. I had no freaking echo. So nothing could sate, nothing could fill that gaping hole.
Did you try and fill it? I mean, you had this letter from your mother, you had your real name, you had your mother's name.
So I had two things going on when I left the care system. One was find your family, like find everybody, and the other was do the poetry. So I would do the poetry. I came on the scene, became known in the country and different parts of the world, and it didn't mean anything to me except for the fact that it was something special was happening. But I had this bigger story, and so I would spend the money that I got through the live gigs and what have you on finding my family. And if anybody from the live gigs said, "Hey, we'd like to make a documentary about you," then I would say, "Well, go back and prove what happened to me in my past." I found my mum at 21 from that letter. She worked for the United Nations. She was from Ethiopia. She had to flee Ethiopia in 1974 after the revolution. Her husband was a minister under the Emperor Haile Selassie and was jailed. She fled. She was in the Gambia. And and I found her there. Yes. Look, the point is this. It's that when I found my mum, she looked at me and she saw the face of the man who impregnated her, because I was exactly the same age he was when he did that.
What did you see?
I saw somebody looking back at me in fear. When my mum walked me up the steps towards the house in the Gambia, beautiful house, she said on that walk of about 10 yards, "Let's not talk about this, I've got a visitor." So within 5 minutes of meeting her, I was sat in the front room talking to a stranger from the UN about the weather in England, while my mum was sat on another chair in the front room looking at me, speaking to that person about the weather. Families are complicated, and I in finding my family, I walked into a complicated narrative. I was a bull in a china shop who didn't realise that I was in a china shop. I was a secret that also exposed other secrets. I was sort of ink on still water. I coloured everything that I touched without knowing it. So it took my mum 9 years to tell me who my father was and to tell anybody in the family that I was around. I spent 9 years becoming very successful as a writer here. That's when I got a lot of heat in those 9 years. But with my mum literally disappearing from each country that she worked from in the UN and not telling me, and then I would have to spend another series of years finding her. You know, I spent time with my mum telling me that my brothers and sisters were my cousin and asking me to act like a cousin towards them. And then I finally found them in New York. Basically, I was stalking my own mother, which is a very scary concept. I found her in New York. My brother picked up the phone and I said, do you remember 9 years ago when you met me in the Gambia when you came back from international schools for Christmas to stay with your mum? I said, it's me, and I was your brother. He then calls my sisters and brothers and tells them, and then I meet them all.
What did it feel like to say those words out loud to him, I'm your brother? Because you'd never said that to anyone before.
Yeah, that's true. But I had my brother, you know, my foster brother when I was a kid felt like a brother to me. But clearly it wasn't. It felt really good, yeah. I mean, you know, I basically have been through, and this is only my mother's side. My adult life has basically been a practice of allowing my family to know that I'm alive. Whenever I found my family, I asked them, I'd like you to find me. I've now found you. I want you to find me, you know. And the truth is that they don't, and that's okay, you know. That's okay. It's one of the biggest things I've learned is that the nature of family dysfunction is at the heart of all functioning families. So
even with support systems around us and families around us and this echo chamber, as you call it, of reflecting ourselves back on ourselves, quite often we struggle with a sense of who we really are. Everybody does that. You so with your extreme circumstances more than any of us. Who are you now? Do you have that sense of who you are now?
That's a really good question. I think I'm getting that sense. I think I'm just going to get it. I think what I've realised is that, you know, we all equal out, you know, with our stuff. We should be protected as children, which I wasn't. But I think that actually I'm coming to the point of realising that every experience that all of us have are bridges to each other. You know what I mean? And like we are all given the gift and opportunity of seeing that bridge and then walking across it, you know, or inviting the other to walk across it. And sadly, there are people in this world who just don't see the bridge. It's there if they see it. You know what I mean? It's there for all of us, man. And I honestly feel truly blessed to be able to see those bridges like flying out from me to like everybody, you know. And, you know, it's an energy and a sense of being which is not, it's not hard work. You know, the hard work is not seeing the bridges. You know what I mean? You see people who walk around all day and they're hard work. You're like, please, God, you know, let it go, man. Because it's easier and more profound and more enjoyable and more crazy to connect than it is to disconnect. I think that I'm here for a purpose. I think that I'm here for a purpose, and I think we're all here for a purpose. You know what I mean?
What's your purpose?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's happening. Whatever my purpose is, it is happening. You know, there's not a day that I don't receive some kind of beautiful, moving text or email or Twitter, you know, on having touched somebody and helped somebody in some way, you know, and I get great succor from feedback and from people stopping me on the street. That happens here in Manchester and it happens in London. And sometimes people stop me on the street, right? They'll stop and I'll stop and they'll say, "Oh," and I'll say, "Oh." They'll say, "Is she?" I'll say, "Yeah, it is." And then I've stopped. My arms are folded, and I'm like, because it means a lot to me to be seen. I know what it is to be not seen.
Well, just over a year ago, you won by a very large margin a vote to become the Chancellor of Manchester University, the place that was your Oz at the end of the Yellow Brick Road. I mean, what did that feel like?
Wow. Okay, wow. Because I've never heard it described as the Oz, but it is actually. You know, that you're right. My life is taking me everywhere, all over the world now, but you're right. It was that place. Look, because there's not been a family, and I'm not going to keep using this, and it's not an excuse, but there has been nowhere to return to. So when I hear my journey reflected back at me through a different lens that's put two and two together, the Oz and the Chancellorship, it's great. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. These things don't come around every day. And I did not expect to win it, because these things don't happen every day. I'm not the person that lots of people are asking to become Chancellor. And by the way, I'm a lot of things. So when they asked me, I had these thoughts of inadequacy. And yet then when I thought about what I'd done for the past year before then, I've been on national radio, made a drama where I said in that drama, Manchester's the greatest place on earth. I'd said that. I'd been commissioned by the Manchester Camerata to do a piece with them where I also said Manchester's the greatest place on earth, and I did that at the town hall in front of a sold-out, packed audience. You know, I gave the keynote address to 1,000 lecturers only from Manchester, the Manchester College, at the town hall only 2 months earlier. I was right for that job, you know, and what I know is that there was the possibility of pretending to be part of the Manchester animal. I am part of the Manchester animal, and I got to be able to say that. I mean, that was so deep for me. I got to say, no, I'm okay. I should be here, folks, you know, and if you're voting for me, then you're voting for the real thing.
The piece of poetry that you produced when you were made Chancellor, I've actually written lots of things down here about that poem, but I'm sat in front of the poet. So you tell me what that poem's about, because we're going to hear it in a moment.
Well, yeah, I'm very proud of the poem that I wrote and that I performed and that was filmed at the university once I became Chancellor. It won awards, man. I mean, that video that has been seen by a lot of people.
What struck me about that poem
is
that it's about inspiring, and it's about seeing the limitless possibilities that we all have as human beings. And yet the most powerful thing in it for me was the refrain about we belong.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, what you said about this being Manchester being the Oz on my horizon, and then me walking down the central aisle of Whitworth Hall, which is like, you know, the Harry Potter dining room, you know, in the college. It was, and being in that procession in the chancellorial robes, surrounded by the incredible intelligence that's held in a university, led by an incredible woman called Nancy Rothwell, with all of my friends in the audience, you know, just lots of my Manchester friends over all of the years since I first came here, you know. Yeah, I felt we belong here in Manchester. I felt that I belong here as Chancellor, and more to the point, I belong here in my own skin. Open the dawn in the open sky, the laboratory, open the book, open the challenge with open eyes. Open, out, look. Open all minds, open all dreams, research, question, open all doors, open all senses, open all defences. Ask, what were these closed for? In the possibilities of light, the nature of trust, the strength of unassailable us. How strong the night lies, as light aerates the dark and atomic dreams multiply from a graphene heart. We who have walked the world in the name of here and where we came from stand in this great city and say, I belong here. I belong. I bring my past, I bring my future, I bring my rights and I bring my song. I stand atop the University of Manchester. We belong here. We belong.
Lemn Sissay was talking to me, Sam Walker. Thank you so much for listening to What Goes On Here.